Hello, folks. My name is Toby Lowe. I'm visiting Professor of Public Management at the Centre for Public Impact. And today it is my very great pleasure to be in conversation with Joy MacKeith.
Yes, so I'm Joy MacKeith, co-founder of Triangle and co-creator of the Outcome Star suite of tools.
Thanks, Joy. So about a couple of months ago, we had a conversation that you instigated that was exploring the relationship between the work you've been doing and particularly the enabling help report that you wrote and the human learning systems approach that I've been helping to develop alongside a whole range of other public service organisations. And we in that conversation we explored different aspects of how your work and ours are complementary complementary in terms of transforming public service. And one of the outcomes of that conversation last time was a kind of desire for me to give you the opportunity to explore some of the issues that we talked about from your perspective, because last time that you were asking me a bunch of questions and I had a bunch of questions that naturally occurred that I wanted to ask you. So we've arranged the second part of this conversation to enable that kind of exploration. So I'm particularly keen to kind of dig into how the outcome star works as a way of supporting public service transformation. So for anyone who doesn't know, can you say a little bit about what the outcome star is and how it works?
Okay, so the Outcome Star is a suite of tools. They are conversational tools that are used in key work settings where there's an ongoing relationship between two people, with one supporting the other to achieve goals. So they're designed to support that process, to support the conversation and support those goals to be achieved. And they're also measurement tools. So they're designed to give kind of distance traveled measures of how far along that journey people have got at any given point in time. I won't unpack the detail of what the stars are, and that might kind of arise in the course of our conversation, but it's probably just worth saying that there are 50 different versions of the star. So they're all tailored to particular sectors or needs. So the very first one was for the homelessness sector. The next one was for organisations working in mental health. We developed one for vulnerable families, older people, and it kind of grew from there. And people do sometimes say, oh, why have you got so many? And actually every single one of those stars has come about because somebody has approached us and said, oh, we like the star, but there isn't really quite one that quite fits for our sector. We'd love to work with you to develop one. So they're all developed kind of collaboratively with service providers and the people that they're helping. And each one sort of is developed over sort of 12 to 18 months because we spend a lot of time working with people to kind of get it right and get it so that the things really kind of resonate for people. And also we sort of do the psychometric validation on the measurement side as well.
Superb. And so one of the things that I'd like to pick up later in our conversation is that relationship between its role as a measurement tool and its kind of role in that therapeutic conversation between the worker and the person supporting them. Initially, I'd like to kind of pick up what I think I heard you say about the kind of co-design process of creating particular outcome stars for particular contexts, like homelessness and mental health. So, if I understand it correctly, the co-design work that you do with is at the kind of organizational level that says what are the kind of outcomes that it would be helpful to enable the kind of therapeutic conversations and do the measurements you do with people. And so, those co-design conversations produce a set of like standardized outcomes for that particular kind of policy or intervention area. Is that right?
Standardized outcome areas, yeah, and descriptions as well of each outcome area has a scale that goes with it. Sometimes, often 1 to 10 scale, sometimes a 1 to 5 scale. So as well as having outcome areas, there's also a description of, okay, what does 1 look like on this outcome scale? What does 2 look like, etc. Yeah.
And from the outcome stars that I've seen, those outcome areas are things like the people's capacity to handle money well, and like whether they feel like how stable their relationships feel. Or is that right?
Yeah, the outcome areas, and as a prompt, because there are 50, I've got the recovery star in front of me. So the outcome areas are managing mental health, physical health, living skills, friends and community, use of time, etc. There are 10. I won't read them out. So that's kind of how they're described.
And so one of the things that I'm curious around that is, so because one of the things that we found through the human learning systems approach is that it's kind of important for each person to be able to describe what matters to them in terms of outcomes. And so what do you find in terms of how those kind of predefined co-produced outcome areas enable or get in the way of conversations that are about what matters to you as a kind of particular?
Yeah. I mean, I understand. I think I understand where you're coming from. That some people on initial contact with the star kind of thing will feel, well, you're pinning things down. It's for each individual person to say, but actually, we're kind of providing a framework rather than pinning things down. So for each star, because they're all holistic tools, so they don't kind of focus, just because this is the recovery star for mental health, that doesn't mean that the whole tool focuses on your mental health and your symptoms or whatever. It focuses on the whole person. So for each star, the outcome areas are designed to encompass the whole of that person's life rather than just honing in on some certain places. So for mental health, I'm just looking at friends and community. Maybe for this person, this is an area that's not working for them. They have some particular things that they would like to achieve, a bit more of a social life, or a social life kind of focused around a particular interest. There's all the freedom for that person to say, this is what's important to me when it comes to friends and community. But the advantage of having those predefined areas is that friends and community is on the map. So they've come in, they're here in the service because of a mental health issue and the knock-on effects of that. If there were no sort of obvious immediate presenting problems around friends and community, the conversation might not go there. Whereas with the outcome star, it kind of ensures that the work is holistic. So what that can mean sometimes is that you actually have a conversation about something that's working well. And that's really nice, because if we all like to feel, even when we're a bit mired in problems, that there are at least some things that we're doing well. So it creates a more balanced picture and is kind of motivating. And also kind of, I don't know, that we've got things like appreciative inquiry, which are designed to kind of help people unpack what is working. And so it also supports that kind of approach, because you're looking at what is working. The other thing that people can say is that they may have been working with somebody for a while before they start using the star. But even if they have been, that often when they use the star, they learn new things and have new conversations because of that thing, that kind of every area of somebody's life is kind of in the conversation and on the map. And one thing that's I've actually heard the same thing several times around the use of the family star is that people are working because maybe there's an issue with school attendance for the children or an issue with behaviour. And through using the star, because there's a domain which is about home and money, what emerges is that there are significant debt problems. And actually, this family is going to struggle to focus on school attendance whilst that problem is creating a lot of worry, creating a lot of practical difficulties. So also, it's not just that it focuses on strengths, but it can also highlight other issues that may not be front and center in terms of the service, but actually are quite important to address.
Thank you. That's because I've not thought about it in that way before, but that sense that they are kind of the outcome areas are kind of conversation triggers about different aspects of a person's life, and that there is that they give kind of scope for what matters to you within kind of friends, family relationships, or whatever. That's not an aspect of that I thought before. So I really like that sense that by thinking about by having conversation triggers about each of those areas, that you can it almost like creates the conditions for that kind of rounded conversation about what matters to people. Can see that. And also the other thing that I heard you say there that I don't think I had quite appreciated before was the relationship between the kind of outcome star and asset-based approaches. I suppose that there's almost, it feels like there's a natural tendency to kind of look at outcome star and go, what are the areas that we need to work on? But actually, that kind of reflecting back, that sense of, oh, look at the areas that you're really strong at is equally kind of the tool can be used in that way as well.
It's and again, it's interesting how certain things come up more than once that you might think would be quite specific. Like I've heard quite a lot of different times that somebody has put their outcome star on the fridge, because here's a piece of paper, like a proper piece of paper, that says that things are that I'm doing some things well, or that says, look, things are improving, because you kind of plot your star shape, and you have the conversation again maybe 3 months later, and you plot another one. And so if things are improving, even if it's only a bit, it's really visible. So yeah, people kind of like that visual representation of what's going well.
Yeah, nice. And this conversation then kind of touches on some of the other kind of worries that I've heard people express about the outcome style, that it kind of overly fits the outcomes that matter to people. And so one of the things I hear people say about is where's the space for emergent outcomes? In order the things that you didn't know were important at the start of your conversations with your key worker. And I think I can guess where you might go with this, but I'm curious to hear about how you've seen it used in a way that enables those kind of conversations about emergent outcomes.
Yeah, so I mean, in a way, a bit similar to the answer to the previous question, when we define what the outcome is, because the first one was about kind of, well, what are the outcome areas? But then within each of those outcome areas, we have a scale that says, well, this is what it looks like at 1, and this is what it looks like at 5, and 6, and 7, 8, 9, 10. So I can, as you've said, I've heard people say, well, who are you? Who are you to define what 10 looks like? That's for every individual to define what 10 looks like. And I guess what we're trying to do when we develop those scale descriptions is create something that is specific enough to be meaningful, not because obviously you could just ask people to say, so how is your physical health? So how are things in terms of sort of friendships and social life? So it's specific enough to be meaningful, but it's broad enough that it doesn't prejudge what is important to any particular person. So I think I had one that I pulled out before in friends, and in the recovery star for friends and social connections, it's something like, I have the friends and social connections that are right for me. That's the top of the scale. So for some people that's a busy social life, and for some people actually it's not at all. It's having one really close person, and feeling that you can chat to the person in the shop. So we're aiming to define things such that those emergent outcomes can emerge. I suppose the other thing to say is, although the outcome star, it has these scales, it has this kind of graphic, so there's quite a lot of kind of content to it. It isn't a sort of a a questionnaire or a survey or something that you can do in a rote way. It's something that needs to be, that key workers need to bring all of their key working skill and interpersonal skill to. So we would look, and that's part of the reason why we have a day's training for every person who's going to be using the star, is to help them understand what the star's about, but also kind of merge what the star brings with their key work practice so that they can find a way to feel at ease and comfortable with it. So hopefully they are asking open-ended questions and allowing the person to speak, and then using the star to kind of draw things together.
Nice. And that kind of brings me to pick up one of the things that kind of immediately sparked my curiosity from one of the things you were saying at the start there, Joy. And I'm curious, what have you learned in those kind of conversations with key workers and in all the kind of material that you get back from people? What have you learned about the kind of the relationship between the star as a measurement tool and the star as a kind of boundary object for a therapeutic conversation?
Well, a few things. I mean, I suppose in terms of the kind of the implementation of the star, people get the benefits of the star as a key work tool and as a conversational tool very quickly. So those benefits are sort of delivered almost immediately. And in training, sometimes people are dead keen. Sometimes they start off a little bit, so what's this kind of thing? But usually by about coffee time, there's a real kind of like, oh no, this is good. This is really going to help me. This is going to serve me. So those benefits are quite quick to get. The measurement benefits take a lot longer to get because they depend on kind of wider organizational systems for use, for collecting data. They require organizations to have a kind of a culture of using data. I mean, most organizations have a culture of providing data to somebody else, but actually to own data and to see it as useful. So for a particular service, for the manager to kind of have a look at what are the outcome areas where people are making quite a lot of progress on, what are the outcome areas where people aren't making very much progress on, and to share that with the team as a starting point for a conversation. I wonder why this is happening. That's a cultural change, and also it's a technical change as well, because you need the IT systems and whatever to kind of do that. So those benefits take longer and are harder work for organizations to achieve. But there's another sort of set of learning around it as well, because we didn't set out to create this kind of dual purpose tool. The very original brief for the very original piece of work that led to the kind of prototype for the start was to create a measurement tool. And so that's what we were working to. And it was only in having created it and then kind of recreated it in a number of other homelessness organizations that we started to get the feedback that people were liking it as a key work tool. And so then as we developed it to enhance those kind of qualities. And in many cases, what might be surprising to people is in many cases, those two things really kind of support each other. So, for example, for key work purposes, it's really helpful to break change down into manageable steps, kind of like, we've all had that kind of thing, if I'm going to lose weight or I'm going to get fit or whatever, but you can't kind of do that. You have to just have I'm going to buy myself some running shoes and go running once a week. We have to kind of break it down. So that supports the key work side of things, but actually it also supports the measurement side of things, because actually change happens in that step-by-step way, and to have kind of nuanced, meaningful outcomes information that you can use in the management of a service and learning about a service, it's really helpful not to just to go, yes, we hit the end outcome, but to have those kind of steps along the way. So there's various ways in which those two purposes really support each other. There can also be ways in which there are tensions between those two purposes. So, for example, to get a really reliable tool that no matter who uses it, you always get exactly the same. You always get exactly the same numbers. To do that, it's good to narrow things down really, really finely and define them really, really finely. Whereas a good keywork tool, so you could end up with 100 questions, but a good keywork tool doesn't pin somebody down for 3 hours answering different questions. So we're always managing that kind of tension between getting something that's good enough in terms of the measurement qualities, but still works as a keywork tool. So yeah, as I say, sometimes they really support each other, those two roles, and sometimes they pull in slightly different directions, and we're creating something that is the best compromise between those two.
Thank you. So, and if I heard you correctly there, where you feel like it's used best for organizational learning is where there's organizations are kind of using that data and making sense of it for themselves rather than kind of passing that data on to others for kind of performance or contract management purposes. I really liked the description that you gave of managers kind of being able to kind of spot patterns across different outcome areas and kind of share those back with the teams and ask the question, what's happening here? Like those processes of shared sense making absolutely align with what we've seen, kind of how data is used well by kind of really effective learning organizations. So it feels like there's a whole range of synergy there. It was brilliant that you talked about some of the tensions as well, because that's going to be my next question about whether you'd ever seen that, because I had seen there was a particular context that I was doing some research in, time where the STAR had been used as a performance management tool. So literally the organization was getting paid on whether the people were progressing from 0.2 on a STAR to 0.5 on a STAR over a kind of set period of time. And in those contexts, it felt like the tool being used as a performance management mechanism was undermining its capacity to be an effective therapeutic tool, because, for example, workers didn't have a choice about when they introduced the tool in their relationship with a client. It had to be done like within a set time of the referral to that organization, and the workers knew that the organization was getting paid on the basis of an increase, I think, which put obviously a really kind of significant stress on, oh, could we bump up that figure over it? So, but what are the kind of, do you kind of recognize that as a tension, and what do you advise organizations to try and kind of mitigate against those kind of uses of it?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. It's a real shame when that happens, because the phrase that's in my mind is kind of killing the goose that laid the golden egg. Like, this is really a really helpful, useful thing, but actually you can kind of kill it by linking cash payments to it, and then clearly there is an incentive for the scores to go up. And actually, one of the things that can be really helpful about the STAR in key work is that depending on where somebody is on that scale, and the scales are underpinned by a journey of change, so that's kind of a model of how change happens. And often that goes from kind of, I can't even look at that problem, don't tell me I'm overweight, or don't tell me any, to, oh yeah, but I can't do anything about it, to, oh yeah, maybe I can, to actually learning how to make it happen. So because there's that kind of underlying model of change, it can really actually help key workers think about how to work with somebody at that particular, because how you work with somebody who's kind of stuck and not looking at it, or how you work with somebody who is kind of, okay, yeah, it needs to change, but I can't do it, is quite different to how you work with somebody who's kind of up and running with making the change happen, but hasn't yet fully got it kind of embedded. So you really don't want to introduce incentives to people to kind of pretend that someone is somewhere different, because because there are quite a lot of knock-on effects from that. So what I always encourage commissioners to do is to say, yes, it's really important that you hold people accountable. You know, if you're commissioning stuff, public money is going out, then yes, they must be held accountable. But what do you really want to hold them accountable for? Because actually, I think accountability for learning, being able to give a coherent narrative of, yes, we do have a way of measuring output. Yes, we are clear what we're trying to achieve. Yes, we do have some data on that. And this is what we do with the data. This is what it's told us. This is the sense that we made of it. And this is what we did differently as a result. That is actually a much tighter and a much more powerful kind of accountability than just saying, you know, we have to move up 2 points on the star, or you have to tick this number of people who've got a job or whatever. Because, well, I know you've written whole papers on that, so I don't need to tell you why, because there are so many reasons why, you know, people aren't necessarily in control of that. It doesn't necessarily happen within the time scale of the project. So that's the direction that we steer people in.
That's really powerful, and it's really exciting to hear you talk about that kind of accountability for learning conversation as your steer for organisations and, as you say, commissioners, thinking about how to use the outcome star well as a tool. And again, there's just kind of really powerful congruence with exactly what we found in terms of what are the characteristics of workers, teams, organisations that genuinely produce outcomes in the world. They are learning organisations. They are continually experimenting with, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this, because that's actually how outcomes are made in the world. Outcomes that are the result of kind of interaction between particular public service interventions and a constantly changing dynamic world that no one ever fully understands. So if anyone says, yes, we have the answer to this and we'll definitely create outcomes, you know that's kind of a fib. And so that using that sense of the outcome star provides one way to gather information about how the continuous experimentation that we're doing in the world, how that's going and what's happening. That absolutely fits with the range of stuff that we've seen about, like, what are the processes that actually support the creation of outcomes in the world. So that it feels like genuinely exciting to me, that because you've come at that kind of problem from a really different direction than we have. So as you're saying, you started with kind of developing a tool that was useful for people in particular contexts, and we've kind of come at it from a problem of from the direction of this approach to kind of outcome-based contracting doesn't seem to work and creates a bunch of kind of gaming. And so to arrive at that kind of shared conclusion from different things, from different angles, feels like quite a powerful. We might be onto something here.
It's very affirming, isn't it? If you come to the same place, you've started from very different places, then it's a kind of it's a confirmation. I mean, I think one of the things with commissioning, you know, is that people in those sorts of roles, they are very far removed from the kind of that relationship at the front line. They may have come from that, you know, so they may have some insight into it, or they may not have come from it. And the further you go up the kind of tree, commissioning, policy making, whatever, the more likely it is that maybe they haven't, or maybe it was a very long time ago. And so I think there can be a real gap of understanding between those sort of direct service delivery and the commissioning. And at its best, I think the outcome star can make visible, because it's all about that conversation that's happening in the direct service delivery. At its best, it can make that visible as you kind of go up the food chain kind of thing, so that the data, as long as people understand what the data is actually about that process of change. It's about how many people went from, I can't even look at that problem, or I don't even know it's a problem because my expectations are so low, to, yes, it's a problem and I feel disempowered. You know, so that's not a great place to be, but it is a step forward. So and then how many people went from, yes, I want to do something about this, I feel some agency, but I actually don't have the skills or don't have the habits or the context to be able to make it work, to, oh yeah, I know what works for me, and I've learned something. So because that's what the data is about, the data is actually about not the severity of the problem, but the person's relationship with the issue. At its best, it can make that process visible so that people understand what the business is, rather than thinking that the business is about a few numbers and a few metrics.
And indeed, and when because I actually have done the outcome star, that day's outcome star training. It was quite a long time ago, but as part of the research process that I described kind of way back, and one of the things that I felt when I did it was, I absolutely understand why, for simplicity's sake, you would call it an outcome star. But actually, I thought it's really interesting because it's not actually measuring change in an outcome; it's measuring change in someone's relationship to an outcome area. And that I thought was is a fascinating framing of this stuff, because it makes it intrinsically relational, and it makes it about a kind of a reflection on the agency that people feel about some of the challenges in their life.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, at the end, when somebody hits the sort of the end of a particular scale, that does reflect a real observable change, in their life. But some of the changes that happen on the way to that are captured are changes that would be more around their internal world, or the way in which they would talk about that. So they would always be observable, but they might not. But it might not be the end outcome. And I guess whether or not they're outcomes kind of depends on how you define your outcomes. Yeah, is an internal change, is that an outcome? I guess we would say that is an outcome.
Interesting. I hadn't quite appreciated that relationship between the kind of scale bit and like progressing along a journey before. So that's quite an interesting thing to reflect on. I also wanted to ask you about kind of picking up the theme that we were talking about learning at both the scale of the kind of relationship between a key worker and the person that they're supporting, and a kind of organizational scale. So one of the things that we found with the kind of human learning systems approach is that this idea that essentially practice is based on kind of continuous experimentation, like let's try this and see what happens. Like I say, at that person scale, but also at the organizational scale. What sense do you have about the kind of role of the outcome star in capturing kind of data around those experiments and explorations that people and organizations run in? And have you seen kind of really good examples of the kind of outcome star used as a way of kind of moving from let's try this to let's actually make this a genuine experiment, and kind of capture data and sense make around it well?
I suppose where, as I say, where the sort of the benefits, the learning benefits are experienced most immediately, I would say, would be in that direct service provision relationship, because in a sense, learning is kind of hardwired into the star, because the journey of change that underpins the scales is different for different stars, but a lot of them, it goes from that kind of stuck, I can't look at it, to accepting help, to believing and trying, to learning what works, and to whatever the end goal is, which might be, I don't need a service anymore, and my goals are achieved, I'm managing this well. So actually learning, experimenting in HLS language, kind of bespoke experiments, but in outcome star language, kind of learning what works, is actually a core part of that journey of change. That so the star is designed to support people to kind of go from yes, I want to achieve that, and I think I can, I can certainly work towards it. But now actually how, so I don't know, the exercise thing, well, I buy the running shoes, and I go for a run. So I buy the running shoes and I go for a run, and then I don't go for another run, and I just don't, And so it's like, well, I did the experiment and it kind of looked like it was going to work, and then it didn't work, So then it's like, so why didn't it work? Well, I didn't really enjoy it, and then it's like, well, actually, maybe if I did it with a friend, then and then you have another experiment. So obviously these are very sort of simple experiments, but it's just to kind of illustrate the point that the star naturally leads to a conversation about, well, how are you going to do this? Give it a go. How did it go? And then also because of this sort of visual tool where you have all the different outcome areas and you kind of get a bit of a shape, it does support people to reflect on their life. It kind of gives them a sense of an overview or a map, and it's, oh yes, actually, as long as I've got that issue with drinking, actually I'm not going to move forward on any of these other things because that keeps holding me back. And so it really sort of supports learning in that way. In terms of sort of the service level or the kind of the organization level, it provides data that can support people in thinking about kind of what's serving and what's not. An example, which is actually from quite a long time ago when we were working with St Mungo's, was we had quite an intensive look at the data from the start and from other things across 4 different hostels. And one of the really interesting things that came out of that was that the men mostly made progress as measured on the star, but women in mixed hostels didn't, and in fact they could go back. Whereas there was one of the hostels was a single sex hostel, and those women went forward. So nice. and then when we talked to the workers about it, they went, oh, yeah, of course, yeah, we know that, but there's a way in which people can know something, but somehow it's not validated or it doesn't have any concrete form. So actually having it on the star then help them to take that seriously as an issue and help them to raise it with commissioners. So it wasn't so much that they did an experiment, let's try putting women in single-sex hostels and let's try putting women in mixed hostels, but the data gave them information about helped a pattern to emerge in quite a distinct way.
Nice, because that would that in the kind of HLS learning circles term, that would be really necessary data to understand what's going on in that particular system and suggest experiments.
Yes.
If we tried
yes.
a single sex hostel, would that help?
Yeah, and in a sense, in a way, they already kind of had the counterfactual there because they did have a single sex hostel, and then there was data from that. Yeah.
Nice. That's been. I feel like that's been a really fascinating kind of, and for me, kind of illuminating conversation about the relationship between the outcome star as a tool and that the capacity for kind of both individual and organizational learning. Is there anything else that kind of occurs to you from this conversation that you kind of want to say around that kind of theme, or any kind of questions you want to ask me around that from the way that this conversation has emerged?
Oh, good question. Nothing. There's nothing particularly occurring to me. I think it's really kind of back to what you said at the beginning, or that it's been a very different journey. I think the outcome star, which has been about sort of modeling change, in that direct service conversation, and then kind of broadening out to other sectors, and then seeing themes around how the star's implemented and the things that get away. That's kind of been our journey, and your journey's been quite different, but just that it's really striking that we've ended up with some very similar conclusions.
And it reminds me that because one of the things that's likely to kick off at some point this year is then the kind of creation of the next round of human learning system case studies. It would be great to maybe have one or two of the examples that you've been talking about of the outcome star really used well as a learning tool at those kind of different scales. It would be great to have like those as part of the learning that we draw together around all of that stuff. So that's a kind of a bit of a note for me for where our next possibly non-recorded conversation.
Okay, yeah, a private conversation. Yeah, no, I'd love to do that.
So thank you very much, Joy. That I really appreciate you taking the time to respond to the questions that I had from our conversation last time, and I hope these two kind of pieces work nicely together as little video blogs.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's always nice to have a chance to kind of respond to some of the things that can come up around the stars. So yeah, thanks very much, and look forward to more.